Built the plant in 53, Pike and Portsmouth DOE. U-235 in the groundwater chain, heavy metals drift with rain. They cracked the pipes, they dropped the shell, still denied what tests could tell. Open air, no tent in place, children sick, no public trace. Atomic corruption, filed it safe, never discussed. Paper trail burned to dust, you won't find what you won't trust. Atomic corruption.
Hello.
Carried down the river bend, across the state, you can't pretend this don't poison in the end. Kids with cancer, no cause named. Dust in schools they never claimed. No swab, no test, no agency, just buried deep bureaucracy. They said
That song is called Atomic Corruption. You'll find it up at James Lucett's site on YouTube. Filmmaker, musician, artist. Welcome, everybody. I'm a bit slow tonight. We had a few issues trying to get the stream to connect again. 709-589-4406 is the magic number to these live shows. This is episode 4000 or something, is it? Here's the good old nuclear industry taking care of your loved ones. This is Nagasaki, Hiroshima stuff, this kind of radiation. His organs melted, eh? He would have died within an hour or something of that exposure. Watch, he leaves his shadow behind. It's the scariest video I've ever saw. Imagine doing that to another human and understanding that they're going to die within an hour. So they would have sacrificed him. They would have cut him open a few hours later. After Nagasaki, Hiroshima, something like 50,000 babies were shipped to Los Alamos National Laboratory in the United States to study the radiation effects on the dead infants. Hello. Trump says he doesn't want to make nuclear dust in Iran. Jeez. That's quite the statement. And then the next headline was Trump warns Iran faces violence like people haven't seen before if the nuclear deal fails. And so my response to that is pretty obvious. I got a couple of responses. With Trump threatening to nuke Iran, should Iran just flatten Israel? And then if Israel doesn't exist, then there's no need to attack anybody anymore, right? The only reason they're attacking anybody is to protect Israel. Right? To protect Israel, they flattened Afghanistan. Millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans. They got rid of the patents and the pensions of the country. Did on the same thing then to Iran, Syria, Libya. And Iran is in a unique position. They can flatten Israel in about 24 hours. Israel's never going to be happy. Israel's never fought a real military. And they're over committing a Holocaust in Gaza. They're destroying Yemen. All they do is just destroy everything around them. And then there is no peace since Israel got there. So I wouldn't be surprised if Iran flattens the Middle East and just be done with it. So, Matt, you got to realize that the United States ain't going to be nuking Iran because China's not going to sit silent, and Russia's not going to sit silent, and neither is a lot of other countries. Like the ultimate outcome, unfortunately, is Israel is going to disappear because everybody's just sick of them. Everybody's sick of them. It's just a matter of time, right? Israel knows it. That's the whole setup, right? The whole setup is about that. Push for a diplomatic solution rather than a war. What do you mean war? Iran's going to flatten every base Britain, United Kingdom, France, United States got in the Middle East within 72 hours. Most of these countries are not going to last 5 or 6 hours. Iran can sustain probably 1,000 sophisticated drones and missiles every week for years with just the stockpile they have now. There's no way that Israel's going to survive. Israel's got all kinds of nukes. They're going to nuke Iran. I wouldn't be surprised if Iran has at least a dozen nukes. You got Russia and China is not going to sit in silence. They're going to give them already have sophisticated equipment. That's why Israel attacked those ports, those thousands of containers. They figured there was a lot of technology there that could screw them up. I think Iran is not stupid. But, this is terrorism to say if you don't accept whatever deal we give you. Iran's not going to disassemble their nuclear program. Iran's not going to, go back into the Stone Age. And Iran doesn't care anymore. They made that very clear when Israel attacked them the last 2 times. If they went right through Israel's defenses, nothing Israel can do about it. They'll take out if Israel attacks their nuclear sites, Iran's going to attack Israel's nuclear sites. Immediately. They're going to take out their power system, their power grid, their power plants. They're going to take out their water filtration facilities, their sewage. They're going to take out their docks. Within 72 hours, Israel, who has never felt any kind of threat like that in their life, is going to be completely out of the picture. They've never fought a real military. Iran's a real military. Trump warns Iran faces violence like people haven't seen before. We've seen a lot of violence on this planet, haven't we? What a stupid thing to say. For Israel. Well, we'll destroy another country just for Israel. We already destroyed millions and millions and millions of people. We already got tens of millions of orphans, tens of millions of refugees to protect this big fucking tumor on everybody in the Middle East. Trump attended a breakfast with business leaders in Qatar, where he remained firm that Tehran must choose between never ever having a nuclear weapon or dealing with violence like people haven't seen before. Never having a nuclear weapon, because if Iran had a nuclear weapon, Trump wouldn't say a friggin' word. Neither would Israel, right? And Israel wouldn't be able to go attacking everybody and destroying and creating millions of orphans. There's only one sentence: they can't have a nuclear weapon. Well, if they get a nuclear weapon, you're not going to be attacking them. Right? Otherwise, what's the big whoop, right? Nuclear power dead in its tracks, with House GOP tax bill advocates warrant. Nuclear power dead in its tracks. Ain't that an interesting statement? Nuclear power advocates warn the industry's recent growth could be halted by the cuts to the clean energy incentives, the free money, right? There is no nuclear renaissance. There is no recent growth in nuclear. It's the same gigawatts as it was in the 90s. There is no growth in nuclear. Everything's posturing. They don't even have a full design. Birdie Pop is next. James, that's cool. Got another song for us tonight, maybe? I shouldn't put pressure on. That's terrible. Oh, my goodness. All right. The GOP bill cuts a number of subsidies for clean energy, tax credits that benefit nuclear power. The nuclear, this is clearly, they're clearly laying out that the nuclear industry can't survive without perpetual handouts, that they're not profitable, that they're completely and utterly dependent upon massive handouts and tax cuts and everything else. Specifically, it curbed the credit known as 45U, which offers subsidies for existing facilities that generate, and so they changed laws to say that nuclear was zero emission, despite the fact that they're the most resource-intensive industry in human history, and that every nuclear power plant has 2 dedicated, massive gas, oil, or coal plants dedicated to it 24 hours a day. And like each reactor, say you got 6 reactors on that site, any site. Well, each reactor needs 1 million gallons a minute. This is an absurd amount of water. You're talking about 4,500 tons. You're talking about 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks driving past your house every 60 seconds, every minute. Imagine 70-plus one-ton pickup trucks with a ton of water on each one, passing your house every second. And they got to dump that water. 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks have to dump that water every minute into the cooling of the reactor. Imagine that multiplied up by 6. And that's just a fraction of the energy that a nuclear plant needs. It needs 2 dedicated gas, oil, and coal plants. So for even a split second to suggest that there's zero emissions, after 14 months, you're taking fuel out of the reactor core and putting it in a pool, we're still splitting atoms forever into the environment, poisoning everything with replicating cells forever. The stuff never goes away. They've been doing it for 80 years. So the accumulation over 80 years is just, how can we be this stupid to allow this to continue and to allow this to happen in the first place, let alone to continue? How can we be that stupid to pretend that this is not, what they already got done to you is irreversible. They poisoned every species on the planet over and over, and every human, to the point where everybody in every species now is producing permanent, anthropogenic, man-made radioactive hormones through their thyroid glands, because that's so irradiated and everything around it. And permanent, every species is producing radioactive stem cells now, including every human on the planet. Do you got any idea what kind of colossal stupid that actually is? And it's not just cancer, it's not just cesium-137. There's heart problems, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. You're into when you have your thyroid producing radioactive hormones, you are in the worst possible predicament. And then at the same time, everybody's producing massive radioactive stem cells. Can you imagine? Can the world comprehend the enormity of that statement? You can't undo this. There's no doubt now. We've done the research which proves there's an extinction event post Fukushima because of Japan. But you gotta have, like, the idea of hormones, which regulate every function in your bodies in birds and animals and mammals, and the stem cells are the development of everything in the body. I mean, when all of this is radioactive, and that's what's going on. So, like, this is absurdness. Zero emission nuclear. Every time I hear that word, I just, you cowards to even suggest it. It also limited Section 45Y, an emission-based tech neutral tax credit that incentivizes zero, you guessed it, zero carbon. Again, this is complete fabrication when nuclear is the dirtiest thing out there, and to suggest that it has zero carbon attributes anywhere in its cycle is absurdness. It's absurd. It's like a kid going to school and saying his dad is Superman and he flies all around the planet all the time, but he doesn't want anybody to know, so don't tell anybody else. It's total fabrication to suggest that nuclear has anything whatsoever to do with zero carbon. It's absurdness. It's scientifically absurd. And Section 48E, another emission-based tech-neutral subsidy for the facilities generating, and nuclear has classified itself, including in the Euro taxonomy and North America, as clean energy, when it's the furthest thing in human history from clean energy. The entire process and the entire history, like, you can shut down a nuclear power plant, take the fuel out, it goes in fuel pools. Everything is still splitting atoms. All the atoms never go away. And they attack everything with replicating cells immediately when they come in close proximity. And stuff like cesium-137 pulse in energy 600 feet. These are catastrophic stuff we're talking about, to everything with replicating cells. I mean, everybody should be picking up torches and pitchforks and going after the nuclear industry. If they had even an inkling of reality of what the nuclear industry has got done to them and has done to them and will continue to do for millions of years, because you can't bring back all the releases from 1,000 fuel pools. Every day. Like there's just think of every fuel pool is releasing 10,000 curies of isotopes today. Curie is 37 billion anthropogenic man-made atoms. So multiply that by 10,000, and there's 1,000 fuel pools out there doing it every day. What do you think the ultimate outcome of 8 million species in humanity is going to be? You're going to be wiped out eventually. It'll take out everything. You don't need accidents. You don't need wars. You don't need to dump it into all the rivers and estuaries and lakes and streams and garbage dumps. You don't need to burn it in incinerators and pipe it directly into the oceans, which is what they're all doing. All of that, by the way. This technology has no right to be on any planet. Has no right to exist, not even for 2 seconds. It's a catastrophic technology because you can't perceive what's going on. You can't smell it or see it or feel it or taste it. Panic is spread within the industry that Congress could be moving to eliminate the credits. That hurts. So this is the industry's panicking because they're going to lose all their free tax incentives and credits and everything else. It's the end of the nuclear industry, and it looks like this is definitely going to happen. Nuclear energy's got a lot of public support. It got zero public support. Like, you just explained why there's any kind of movement in the industry. It's because all these incentives, all this free money floating around for the industry. But you gave the nuclear industry everything they wanted, right? Always, and it still hasn't. There is no nuclear renaissance. There simply can't be because the industry is too corrupt. It's full of nothing but bad actors, and it's full of the most vile people. They won't let real academics, real scientists, real people into the industry because they'll be mortified and horrified, and they'll be just endless whistleblowers. And the industry's unbelievably aware of that. And so they sealed their own fate and everybody else's. Got a lot of public support, I think, from leadership. So that's not public support if it's from leadership. They contradict themselves constantly in this story like that. In the administration, yet this proposal really does not affect the support that's been expressed publicly Brad Townsend, Vice President of Policy Outreach for the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions. Can you imagine what kind of moron this guy actually is? Incredible education. Going around $5,000 suit and dirty underwear all day long. But has the common sense of a fruit fly. That's the problem with this industry. Only the fruit flies with $5,000 suits on is allowed into the industry. Shit flies. I blew up laughing when I seen that story. And I was like, that's the first bit of good news I've seen forever. I think from our perspective, as like from the media, I think from our perspective as written, this proposal could really stop the nuclear revival dead in its tracks. I mean, if that's not in your face, blatant, sort of robbing the taxpayers in order to get any. But there is no nuclear renaissance. There's the typical, there's lots of posturing we see with the industry, but we don't see anything coming to fruition, like compared to what's going offline all the time. So each year there's more goes offline than comes online in nuclear, worldwide. But I mean, they're doing the best they can. They're just dumping transport truckloads of money each country into this industry, and it still can't accomplish anything because the administration is everywhere so corrupt. 90% of the funds are stolen by administration and spent in administration. So the administration living high on the hog, huge $1 million paychecks each year, massive incentives. Like Hanford is paying companies $50 million, $100 million a year in bonuses. That don't go to the employees, that going to the administration. Oh, they came in on time. Here's $50 million. Maybe they can do it again someday. That's like they have to bribe everything in the industry to do anything. It's 100% corruption. There's not a single part of the nuclear industry. There's nobody in the nuclear industry like. Hey, thank God for that frigger over there. At least he's sensible, right? No, you'll never see it because the rest of them will hire assassins to kill them because that makes the industry. Then the industry has to try to be a human again. The industry has never been a human. When you look at the legacy of the industry, the Manhattan Project really set the stage for what we see right now. They had thousands and thousands of scientists, and they were segregated from the Manhattan Project, right? But they had 10,000 spies spying on the scientists and their families and anybody they communicated with. And they had 10,000 other spies spying on the spies that were spying on the scientists. They're still doing that today because that was easy money, and they never gave it up. It's under the secrecy program. Canada is one of the most corrupt, period, in the nuclear industry. Canada is just disgusting. It's totally captured, right? All the universities, all the media is captured. And the whole industry's existence, so-called renaissance, which is simply not happening. But the movement you're seeing in the nuclear industry right now is predicated upon incentives, upon bonuses, upon free money, upon not paying no taxes, upon everything being handed to them, and they still can't accomplish anything because they're a bunch of bozos, a bunch of meatheads, a bunch of zeros, a bunch of chicken necks. These are the entitled generation of inbreeds from previous generations of inbreeds, and they're so entitled that their parents ripped off and were so wealthy from so many scams. And they're so used to not designing anything themselves, see? With these deadlines, most recently announced nuclear energy projects such as small modular reactors risk not receiving any part of the credit. They're literally in panic mode there right now. Meaning there's not a small modular reactor that will qualify for the credits, which means goodbye, small modular reactor pipe dream. The industry can't do anything on their own. They're just too corrupt. Have we ever seen a single story, say in the last decade, in the last 10 years? I've been doing this for 23 years, but in the last 10 years, have we seen a single story where the nuclear industry even though it's not true, but come across as a good person? We've never even seen that. They're just incapable of visioning that. Right? The industry is so corrupt, it's so vast, it's so entrenched into the industry itself that they count on that. They're counting on the corruption each year in order to have their swimming pools and have their summer vacation homes and have their yachts and have their garage full of expensive cars. They're dependent on, they're completely, like when they go to college, this is what they have in their head. When they go to university, that's what they're going to universities to get that job so they can steal everything. Like it's blatantly clear what I'm saying is the reality of the industry. United States buried millions of gallons. Again, this is an excellent demonstration right here. United States buried millions of gallons of wartime nuclear waste, and Dodd cuts could wreck the cleanup. And what the story is actually about is Hanford. And so when they tell you they buried millions of gallons, and we'll get to the story in a moment, they're talking about 177 large drum type containers you see at oil sites, these great big massive multi-story tanks. And there was 177 buried in the ground, which was 50 million gallons or something. But they had dumped, of the same material, 450 billion, not million, but billion gallons into 41 miles of unlined trenches at Hanford, which is equal to an aquarium of nuclear waste. They're splitting atoms, by the way. 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet more than once. But they got everybody focused on the 177 tanks with millions of gallons instead of the real issue. And they spent, it's absurd how much money they spent just talking about the tanks. They haven't done anything, but they allegedly built what I call, my description only, I made up a word for a glassification plant. And the industry gets really roiled up whenever I call it that over the years. But it's basically, they're going to dehydrate the waste in the tanks, which means you're going to release absurd amount into the environment again. We're only talking about 177 tanks. Let's forget about the 1.4 million same size tanks that they dumped into the soil, because that does get mentioned, but it's pretty rare. It'll never get mentioned when it comes in the context of this stuff. It'll be mentioned in a different story talking about the waste from the Manhattan Project, but they'll never talk about, do the comparison, right? Hanford made the plutonium for the U.S. atomic bombs. Canada supplied them with a lot of the material, by the way. And its radioactive waste must be dealt with. So did Australia. But Canada supplied a lot of it. This Richland, which is like 30 miles away from this massive 585-mile disease factory, square mile disease factory, the city's high school sports team is still known as the Bombers, Hiroshima and Nagasaki Bombers, with a logo that consists of the letter R set with a mushroom cloud from a nuclear bomb. Like sort of brainwashing is still desperation over there. They turn it into a pride, because the minute that they stop looking at it as a pride, then they realize they should all move away from there because it's a nuclear wasteland. Richland lies just 30 miles from the Hanford nuclear site, where they have so much nuclear waste, it defies any kind of rationale whatsoever. So, and the waste I'm talking about was just a Manhattan era waste, which is like a 10-year waste, where they have If they made a nuclear aquarium out of it, it would be 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet. Living 30 miles from something like that is idiotic because they have forest fires, they have droughts, and actually there's deserts there. And so this radiation fallout that's been there for many decades will blow easily into the communities, the farmlands. They're getting their water from the Columbian River, for goodness sakes. There's spots on the Columbian River that they had found after the Manhattan Project. And the shoreline was at 70 sieverts per hour. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. So if you're in a fishing boat and you're drifting past that, you're going to die that day or that week or that month. Because you drifted past that place. And it's going to be really difficult to connect it to Hanford because of the way radiation typically works. Not everybody's getting autopsies. Right? A dark legacy of Hanford still lingers. Vast amounts of highly radioactive waste nobody is quite sure what to do with. So here they're talking about the tanks. Residents long spearheaded an operation to deal with the 56 million gallons of nuclear waste left behind. Residents. Not the nuclear industry, but residents. In dozens of underground tanks. It's 177, not dozens. And a cleanup that is expected to cost $500 billion. No, it's expected to cost at least $750 billion more. It may not be completed, and the numbers they said, the official numbers were 200 extra years beyond that. So the year 2300. And the 56 million gallons is irrelevant because they dumped 450 billion gallons directly into the soil of the exact same stuff. Like it's impossible to like the nuclear industry. It's impossible. There is nobody there with any redeeming qualities whatsoever. So I put my tea in a thermos tonight, so we're gonna have hot tea to cut the dust from my throat when I'm talking here. So dirty story saying there's dozens of underground tanks when there's actually 177, and everybody knows that. And the 56 million gallons that's in the alleged tanks, a lot of it, because they're putting this heavy sludge in the tanks. So at the bottom of the tanks was your plutonium, or the neutrons, the betas, the alphas, the gammas, so you had chain reactions. You burned holes in the tanks, and a lot of stuff just ran out. And it's on an incline straight to the Columbia River. The industry is insane, eh? 560 square miles, 1,450 square kilometers site. Like they had to grab that whole area, and you had to evacuate these communities because of the radioactive fallout, and they released absurd amounts of radioactive fallout. Like they had former retired employees would sit in fields. They would take people out of the old age home and sit them in fields on chairs and release, when the wind was blowing in a certain direction, and release the radiation, and then study them like guinea pigs. I mean, they have a graveyard not too far from Hanford with over 700 children with congenital malformations in them. They died of congenital malformation. I wonder what could cause that if it wasn't Hanford. Have you ever heard of another graveyard like that? Concerns have been raised by some over the difficulty former workers face in making medical compensation claims to the government for everything from cancer to lung diseases, to heart diseases. Now, there was a law passed that all you had to do was prove you worked there for 8 hours. Not 8 hours a week for months or years or anything, but 8 hours. And you're entitled to a payout of up to $150,000 and maybe a pension and your health care coverage. So what they're saying there, I don't know if it's very accurate at all. Taken together, there's fresh anxiety in the community where many are still living with the health and environmental effects of Hanford. the anxiety in a community. So they are in one sense acknowledging it. The tribe recently, the native community, the Yakama Indian Reservation, signed a deal to carry out the first elk hunt in the area for 7 decades. Why, oh why, oh why would you go into a nuclear wasteland to go hunting? Why would you feed your loved ones food from a nuclear wasteland? Why would you do that? Because the industry has, and the Union of Unconcerned Scientists is there. The Union of Unconcerned Scientists they got to be some of the evilest people I've ever seen. Dr. Elizabeth Meager, a health data specialist with the Union of Unconcerned Scientists, is conducting research in the communities around Hanford. And wait till you get a load of this human scumbag. She says there's a history of government-led cover-ups, which is true, over the years at the site, including what is known as the Green Run. Is what she does with this story that made me sick. The intentional release of 8,000 so-called curries of iodine-1. Like, what the hell is an iodine-1? Iodine-131 is what it actually was, right? Because we've covered this. 8,000 curries. Just bear with me. By comparison, the leak of radioactive material at 3 Mile Island involved just a dozen curries. That's what they're saying. So just let me bring up just give me a second. It's going to take me a minute. Some things are easy to find. It's just a perpetual evil. That's what we see from this industry. Is so a curry is 37 billion atoms. So a gram of cesium is 88 curries. 88. So saying that 3 Mile Island, let me go back to that, was just a dozen. So they're saying 3 Mile Island released a dozen curries, which is about 1/8 of a gram. Or you can count on the Union of Unconcerned Scientists to stab everybody in the throat every chance they get. That's the only thing we know about the Union of Unconcerned Scientists, is they're sadistic monsters if they work there. You can't get a job there unless you're completely sadistic monsters. Okay, so 8,000 curries was released. Like, if you look at what United Kingdom done to Australia, where they wrapped radiation up in conventional explosives, dirty bombs, and blew them up. Some of these were like 90 pounds of plutonium, for instance, and just blew it up with dynamite. Okay, but let's do the numbers on this out of curiosity. It'll take us a minute, right? Here we go. So 8,000 divided by 88 is 90 curries, or 90 grams. 90 grams, and divide that by 29 grams to get an ounce. It's just 3 ounces. It's a lot of isotopes, though, don't get me wrong, right? It's a significant amount of isotopes. but it's nowhere near the facts, right? It's nowhere near the reality. It's denying any reality, and suggest that 3 Mile Island was 1/8 of a gram. That's what they're saying, right? It was a dozen curies. And cesium has 88 curies. Strontium 90 has 140 curies per gram. So to suggest that 3 Mile Island, which was thousands and thousands of pounds, disgusting, just disgusting, just revolting. And what's the doctor scumbag's name? Elizabeth Meager. So that story, which led you in different directions the whole way through, nowhere near the truth, saying dozens of tanks when it's actually 177, everybody knows that. When there was talking about 56 million gallons, but it's widely acknowledged he dumped 450 billion gallons of the exact same stuff into 41 miles of unlined trenches right alongside the Columbia River, where they have massive rain, snow. Like the opportunity to push this stuff into the Columbia River is guaranteed. By comparison, a leak of radioactive material at 3 Mile Island was just a dozen curies. And there's 88 curies in a gram of cesium-137. I mean, that's some serious evil right there. There's no reason to be that evil. There's no reason to be that monstrous. And then to suggest this is what they're going to spend almost $500 billion on, when it's actually 750 billion, 3/4 of a trillion, not half a trillion, curies of iodine 1, right? What do you mean iodine 1? What the fuck are you talking about? Wears me out. Dr. Scumbag is a health data specialist with the Union of Unconcerned Scientists. It's just you disgusting maggots. Just disgusting, isn't it? What censorship they're going to do at midnight, I wonder? There's some pretty heavy censorship I noticed here right away. Yeah, I knew what the poll tonight was going to be brutal censorship. The last 3 videos are just absurd censorship, which means quite a few people must be watching me or new people coming on board. That's their routine, right? Oh, nobody's watching him. I'm not going to watch that. But see, this is such a specific subject. Like if you're a policymaker, you're investors or something like that, where else are you going to find this information? You're not. It just doesn't live anywhere else. It doesn't exist anywhere else. Nobody else is going to tell you what I'm telling you. And I don't lie. I don't make shit up. There's no need to. How can you make this shit up, right? Why would I try to misrepresent any facet of this? What's the point of that as an educational program? Like when I cough, I turn the volume down. You don't hear nothing out there, I hope. There's no movement on the meter up there, sorry. Sometimes you don't know with the equipment, right? Did they have the wrong button pushed? Or in public health, we're doing work to improve the well-being of the public, the disgusting parasite says. What a parasite, eh? And she thinks of herself as a human, probably. Dr. Elizabeth Subhuman McClure. Imagine how evil that creature got to be to do what she's doing and say what she's saying. A health data specialist with the Union of Unconcerned Scientists. Have we ever come across anybody at the Union of Unconcerned Scientists that is even come across half human? I've covered probably 400 of their stories over the last decade alone. By comparison, leak. There's cancer clusters. People who ran away And back then, having pets was very popular. People who ran away when they came back, their pets were dead or blind. You're going to call that a leak, are you? Yeah. I'm not going to say the word I should call you, but... Curries of oi. What the hell is an oi? Iodine 1. What the hell is an iodine 1? Have I got the tables here? Hang on. Let me bring up... maybe I got the tables. Just give me 1 second. I don't... Well, I can find it other ways, I suppose. Just... yeah, it might be there. Yeah, it should be right here. There you go. Isotope data. Let's look up for iodine 1. Did iodine do? I can't remember. Isotopes of no. Hang on here. Let me look over here. Maybe I can spot it. I can't remember. Yeah, there's iodine. See, there is no, so there's a 108, and it goes all the way up to 144. There is no iodine 1. They didn't want anybody looking it up, I suppose, right? That's not a typo. That's the Union of Unconcerned Scientists. Like, these are vile people that do stuff like that. You really got to be a lowlife to do something like that. A curry is 37 billion. 37 billion. And there's 88 curries per gram. And so 3 Mile Island, they're saying 3 Mile Island only released a dozen curries, which is 1/8 of a gram, basically. Say 1/7, we'll be generous. Say 1/7 of a gram. How can you have any respect for an academic is beyond my imagination. The estimated 1 million gallons of radioactive waste are already leaked into the soil because several dozen storage tanks are cracked. Well, the tanks are holding around 300,000 gallons each. By the way, these tanks don't crack. It doesn't work that way. These are not eggs. There was a chain reaction because you had gammas, neutrons, betas, alphas in the bottom of it, and which was caused and we've seen this in Mayak too, right? Up in the Tetra River in the former Soviet Union. A plan to send cracks. These people should be in jail. Since 2000, the government paid out at least $2.2 billion to former Hanford employees, representing 13,000 people. This is 1985. Solving these complex environmental problems will rely on the same drive, dedication, human ingenuity, and political will put into building the bomb. Where he built cities with tens of thousands of scientists. So they're saying you need tens of thousands of scientists. You need an unlimited budget. You need this, you need all of that. No, you need to get rid of these people and replace them with actual people that want to do the job, that are not part of the industry, or not 100 billion times corrupted. Otherwise, it's just going to be 90% of the money gets stolen by administration forever. And because they've been doing it for so long, they don't want to give up that meal ticket. That's like, do you got any idea? And we've done some of the numbers. It was like $240 million a day they spend there. It was one of the numbers that they put out there. Works out to $240 million a day. Pretty easy to steal and steal and steal and steal when you're throwing that kind of money on a site where there's perpetual abuse on top of that. Top Iranian official says Tehran would forego highly enriched uranium in a nuclear deal with Trump. Of course, the media loves to put this narrative out there, even though we know it's not true. He said Iran would commit to never making nuclear weapons, getting rid of its stockpiles. Iran would never commit to making nuclear weapons, but they'll never get rid of their stockpiles either. Agreed to enrich uranium only to a low level needed for civilian. I have never seen any evidence that today. There was just an absurd amount of stories about this. And allow international inspectors to supervise the process in exchange for immediate lifting of all economic sanctions on Iran. That's never going to happen. Asked if Iran would agree to sign an agreement today if those conditions were met, he said yes. Again, you can't believe the media. You got to be nuts to believe the media. Well, Trump threatened to nuke Iran, with Trump threatening to nuke, supposed to be threatening, to nuke Iran should Iran flatten Israel, because Iran could do it in like 24 hours, and then the Middle East can live in peace and everybody else on the planet can finally get back to having a future. Otherwise, Israel's just, it hates everything down there. It all it wants to do is, it won't attack anybody with a military because it can't win. So then it has to hide behind the skirt of the United States and hide behind the skirts of United Kingdom, hide behind the skirts of France. Right, that's what they do. They can't build any sophisticated weapons themselves. All the technology that they're building down there, they stole from some company. And they're the biggest welfare on the planet, and they bitch and whine and snivel, and they hate everybody. They hate everybody on the planet. They're carrying out a Holocaust in Gaza, starving whatever is left there to death. You know, they erased all the schools, they erased all the museums, they erased all the universities, they erased everything in Gaza with the name Palestine or Gaza on it. The so-called soldiers that never fought a real military. Don't worry though, because the Torah and the Talmud says the world will turn on Israel. So they're self-fulfilling prophecy, but it's backfired. And so I was limited to how much information I can put there, right? So the question was, with Trump threatening to nuke Iran, should Iran flatten Israel? What I mean by that is take out their nuclear sites, which I'd never want to see happen, of course. Take out their water filtration, their water facilities, take out their power systems, take out their sewage, take out their ports in 24 hours, which is what's going to happen if they attack Iran. There's nothing they can do. They can't stop that from happening. Then maybe Israel will come around and say, well, you know, because right now they've never ever had to answer for their crimes against humanity. Right? They've never had to answer for it. They've never fought any military with 4,000 tanks and jet fighters and sophisticated technology that can fight back and sustain the fight, that are well funded. They've never done that. They can't win that fight. They haven't got the experience. They're only used to shooting fish in a barrel. They always take the most cowardly routes. See? They only attack those who can't fight back. That's what they do. What should happen to them? You know, really, what should happen to them? They says anybody attacks them, they're going to attack them back 10 times harder. And the people they attack are people that can't fight back. If Iran attacks them, are they really going to attack Iran 10 times harder? When their nuclear plants are melted down, their weapons facility in Damota is melting down, their nuclear weapons site is blown up, their wharfs, their big docks for the container ships are all destroyed. They can't bring in any toilet paper anymore. They say they're surrounded by people that hate them, but That's because they haven't stopped attacking them since they got there. It's just, they're such a coward society, right? They purposely shoot children in the head and in the center of the chest. I don't know how they can call themselves soldiers. I can't comprehend how that works. How can you call yourself a soldier when you've never fought a real military? Who cares about that anyway? 18 viewers, 15 likes, 14 votes. EU delay puts nuclear-produced hydrogen in limbo. And again, the industry bristles at the uncertainty. So the tax breaks, all the legislation that the Biden administration put in there to give them all the money they could ever dream of is being chopped down. Their hydrogen now is going to be delayed for a couple of years. And their most important, they were hoping to get this up and running. The European Commission hitting pause on a big decision whether nuclear-produced hydrogen should be labelled as a low carbon under the EU law. Hydrogen, which is the pink hydrogen, they call it pink hydrogen, right? Is the most resource-intensive hydrogen production there is. That's a whole bunch of stories that came out several years ago. The nuclear equation is really simple. It has to go. Geothermal is your solution. What are you looking at idiotic nuclear for? Well, because the industry is just completely saturated with scumbags and morons and dummies and arseholes and cowards. Just like the Israeli military, just saturated with all these cowards that have never ever done anything. They only destroy. Just hang on one second. There you go. I'm not sure how much I got there, but I've been at this a long time, and I've never ever seen another industry compared to the nuclear industry that is absurd amount of cowards. Nuclear reactors are most certainly not clean and not zero emission. Nuclear has fewer emissions than other sources of power. Think again. So you're going to use the most resource-intensive industry to make a very resource-intensive commodity known as hydrogen. And then have the incredible, unbelievable, moronic arrogance and hubris to call it pink hydrogen. Instead of kicking off discussions in June 2026 as initially planned, they're now moved up to 2028, a 2-year delay, and it's got people talking. Well, the investors are not going to go near it, thank goodness. Just like the small modular reactors now. Now they lost all their free money, incentives, all their tax breaks and everything else. Watch the stocks just crumble. I mean, yeah, they're artificially inflated as it is by the 14 biggest financial institutions on the planet. They cooked up at the Conference of Parties 29 last year in Baku, which has given Israel all its dirt cheap oil and gas. That's going to stop if they attack Iran. They're going to lose all of that right away. Inflation worldwide is going to be nuts. I see all the pro-Israeli morons are here. Hello, morons. You can call in, morons. 709-589-4406. You can, but you won't. You can call in at 709-589. Tell me why I'm wrong. Hello, everybody. Come on, Israel, give me a call. 709-589-4406. Let me hear your rationale. Let's have a debate. You can't debate me. You can't win that one. I'm not going to hold my breath, wait for you to call. Nuclear reactor helped power Los Angeles. Should we panic or be grateful? What kind of shithead moron story is this? And this is the problem with the nuclear industry, isn't it? We get all of these shit for brains. All of these moron dummies. All these earth lickers. These fiendish, dark, despicable, atrocious, limp risk. Extracting uranium for use as nuclear fuel has left extensively groundwater contamination, air pollution across the southwest, especially on tribal land. The Navajo was 15,000 abandoned uranium mines and tailing ponds. And, of course, they had that huge tailing pond disaster that destroyed the health of almost everybody in Navajo. We see that throughout the whole industry. They go after the native communities no matter where they go. Like there might be better, easier, accessible uranium somewhere else. They won't do it. They'll go after whatever pollutes the natives. They really are just unlikable people, the whole nuclear industry. It's just all the inbreeding, eh? And you have all these cowards and serial killers inbreeding. This is what you end up with. Now we're stuck with a radioactive planet, and every species, every human, all 8 million species and every human on the planet is now permanently producing radioactive stem cells and radioactive hormones. Do you got any idea what kind of colossal stupid that's going to turn into? When we talk about nuclear, thoughts often go towards spent fuel storage. Spent fuel storage. The fuel is taken out and put in a pool of water for decades. And what that means, though, is it's still splitting the same atoms as it was to boil water for 1 million homes. But now those tall, skinny stacks on the sites, it's being pumped out of that at a rate of tens of thousands of curies a day. Of all the isotopes you can imagine, the biggest byproduct is going to be the curium isotopes, which need lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium. And Israel doesn't tell the Israeli population that their fuel pools are splitting atoms, I can tell you that much. And there's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide doing the same thing. We're guaranteed to destroy the planet. And so you need a couple of nuclear wars or something to help cover up the signature, right? That's what they're up to. Because that's what morons do. Waste ponds at Energy Fuels, White Mesa uranium mill in southeastern Utah. These are not ponds, these are chemicals. This is not water, it's chemicals. And the chemicals are allowed to evaporate rather than stored for thousands of years because there's no one to hold them accountable. Like Israel, the industry has never been held accountable a single time. And if you go over to my BitChute, you'll find real presentations on Israel that I've done. I want to provide you all the documentation you could ever hope for. I do it for anybody out there that's evil. I don't care if it's Israel. I don't care if it's this Muslim. I don't care if it's this. I don't care if it's that. If they're evil and they're in the news, they're most likely... In hopes the mini nuclear plant will someday join solar panels. Mini nuclear plants will someday... Why would you use mini nuclear plants when you can use geothermal? Why would you do that? As a crucial tool in replacing planet-warming fossil fuel. Fossil doesn't warm the planet, shit for brains. the radioactive emissions from 1,000 fuel pools, not counting all the dumpings and all the nuclear meltdowns and all the accidents they covered up and everything else, not counting dumping it in the ocean for 30 years unmitigatedly, not counting all the nuclear weapons and everything else. But just the emissions from the fuel pools worldwide, 1,000 fuel pools, each atom, and there's 37 billion in a curry, and there could be 88 curries in a gram. And like Japan was at least 30 million pounds gone. So do your curries on that and start crying, because that's the appropriate thing to do. But if you take all the releases, all of that is still out there floating around, pulsing energy at the speed of light every second, every one of those atoms. It's the equivalent of a snowstorm you can't see covering the entire planet forever. And instead of snowflake, it's an anthropogenic man-made atom that's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. The emissions from fossil fuel is carbon, which grows trees and plants and humans and puppies and birds and everything else. So to conflate fossil fuel emissions, or gas or oil or coal emissions, with planet warming is absurd when you have perpetual releases and explosions and detonations. Like if you look at the Soviet Union's biggest nuclear bomb, it was 50 megatons. That was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki, Hiroshima bombs going off at one time. 3,800 Nagasaki plutonium bombs, because Hiroshima was a uranium bomb, still brutal, but Nagasaki was the first plutonium bomb. And that was the better way to do the bombs, apparently, so they never done the uranium bombs again. Every bomb after Hiroshima was a plutonium bomb. And tritium, which is what Hiroshima, or the Soviet Union's biggest bomb, was a tritium bomb, which is what the Canadian CANDU reactors are for, producing the tritium for the nuclear weapons for the Americans. And he poisoned all of Canada and the Great Lakes within a few decades. Like on a number that most people can't even comprehend. And it never stops hemorrhaging tritium from the CANDU reactors in Canada, which have been going for many decades, and this stuff doesn't go away for 120 years. And it's not just tritium, of course, right? Tritium-3H, I should say, which tritiates all the other water on top of that. Let me go backwards. Here in LA, we live with it almost always safely for decades. Well, how can you quantify that? Because the minute, whenever you change the fuel, you got to open the reactor up. All those isotopes are released. You're taking the fuel and putting it in a pool where the isotopes are released all day long. And all of these places, except for a few, are surrounded by farms. And so to suggest that you live with it safely is absurdness. Because the emissions causes heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. There's an absurd amount of diseases. The first studies are dementia, or Down syndrome and autism, for goodness sakes, after an event. But the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation on a scale that the world refuses to have a conversation about. Because that's the death of the industry right there. The minute you be honest about a fuel pool's emissions is the minute you can watch the nuclear industry die. And nuclear, for all its flaws, is hardly the apocalyptic threat to humanity that its most righteous detractors make it out to be. I think I'm probably one of the most righteous detractors this industry has ever come across. I'm not bragging. I'm stating the fact. Name anybody more prolific than I am. Name someone more prolific. That's the scary part. I just want to find my way back here. Hang on. It's an apocalyptic event, you say, is it? Well, let's look at my research expeditions for 6 years. The species. Now, I went from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean without coming ashore. Well, I go to different ports to get fuel and supplies and fix shit. It took me forever to build that whole operation. I sacrificed everything. The species to your left are exterminated. That's an apocalyptic event. That's an extinction level again. The species to your left are exterminated. I know because I went back for 6 years, 5 more years after the first year, and these are my pictures on this side. The species to your left didn't come back. And if you plowed in a healthy coastline, the species from deeper on both sides will fill up the gap right away. But the ocean was soup of life. A glass of water would have 1 billion creatures in it. The eggs, 75 to 100 million of it would be the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestration chain. But the other 900 million creatures, or plants, or whatever, because like the legs and the eggs, the larvae, the sperm and everything of those species to your left is phytoplankton for its first weeks or months. And so that would normally, it'd be impossible to have a naked coastline. It's impossible because the species down deep on both sides would fill up the gap. That didn't happen after Fukushima. And the species, think about these species you're looking at right there. And ask yourself, how do they get cancer? All along the Canadian Pacific, and this story was reported when I was out there on the ocean for all these years. All along the Canadian Pacific coastline, not mussels are dying, they were gone in 2016. When every rock should have been covered in at least mussels anyway. And the giant sea plume and sea anemones. Bodies are swollen by cancerous tumors, because that was the documentation I brought back. Unprecedented mutations allowing cancer to spread from one species to another like a virus. How does cancer show up in sea urchins and starfish and sea anemones and scallops and abalones and oysters? And how does that work? We've never heard tell of that before. But the starfish that I managed to find, all of them had incredible tumors. They were just disfigured starfish. The species to your left are exterminated. And that's because it would have happened anyway, but that was because the pulse event at Fukushima, which was 36 reactor cores in 8 fuel pools at the top of 4 reactor buildings. Reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you can go to my playlist and find, or just, like the best thing to do if you're new here is to go back to March the 11th this year, videos. And I done, I don't know how many videos I've done a lot. I've done like at least 8 anniversary videos because there's so many facets to this story. I've done at least 8 videos on the anniversary. 8 days in a row or something like that. I lost track of it now. I can bring it up for you. Hang on here. Excuse me while So if you go way back a couple of months, just a couple of months, you'll see the anniversaries. I went back too far? Well, that's way back too far. That's a really important video there. 2011 FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. Fukushima's March the 18th, 14th anniversary. So 14 years later, so you got to come all the way back, because I've done a preamble for 4 or 5 shows. Man, that's some great material right there. Inside the bizarre mind of the pro-nuclear. That's another statement of a lifetime. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 736 Fukushima mysterious pictures is an absolute watch. Evidence that the International Atomic Energy Agency deleted sections of my live anniversary is absolutely a watch. 3 Mile Island is really important videos. And if that's like these videos are too much for you, then I got a shitload of short videos. I got some real cool short videos too. Like they're all incredible videos. And the views on every one of them are views where I had them up in the preamble. None of my videos, my short videos, have ever been associated with another video. I've been totally ostracized. And the most views I got in any video is 525. And that'll give you some context of how many times I used it as a preamble to one of my live streams. But just go and read all the headlines. Well, you don't have to watch the video. They're short, but... let's keep going here. With Trump threatening to nuke Iran, should Iran flatten Israel in the Middle East and live in peace? I'm not saying that they should go do it. I don't think anybody would give a shit if they did. I certainly wouldn't. But I'm just saying, with all the threats that they're making, would you be surprised? Let's get back into the news cycle. Man. Like, this is a model of radioactive fallout I'm showing you here. This is not a model, rather. This is a study from the French government of 1 million. This one was based on 15 days, 16 days of radioactive fallout. At 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air, what it was, or I'm not atoms, but 1 million to 10 million times what it was pre-Fukushima. Like, all of Japan is a nuclear wasteland. All the animals are emaciated. Yeah, they're trying to blame it on climate change, but what is climate change? We broke the food chain from radioactive fallout. That's what the radioactive fallout done, was it broke the food chain. That's 20 days of radioactive fallout in that study. That's 19.5 days of radioactive fallout in that study. You feel me? A journalist is somebody to be feared and scorned. Like me, I'm feared and scorned. Let's get back. What were we at? 600 and... we still got some stories on Iran to cover, and Trump and everybody. We want to get back to that picture. Japan picked up 30 million one-ton bags of radioactive fallout in just 3% of Fukushima prefectures. The food was banned by 55 countries in 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima. And one of those was Tokyo. 55 countries banned the food. 14 prefectures, not Canada. Canada's not a real country, right? Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days because it fucking hates us. It decided to just go ahead and poison everybody. Now we have obesity rates at 90%. America 74%. Obesity rates doubled in Japan in the first year, which is a marker of significant radioactive brain damage. Well, your thyroid, you're producing radioactive hormones and radioactive stem cells. What do you think is going to happen? Right? And then it's in your pituitary gland in your brain, because your pituitary gland stores the hormones created by your thyroid. You wonder why all the children, all the species are missing, the babies are not producing in the wildlife anymore? Well, Fukushima was a pulse event. Some researchers found that transitioning 100% clean energy is possible even without nuclear. Why would you use nuclear when you got geothermal? Well, you're probably not going to have nuclear much longer now they lost all their tax incentives. That's all she wrote for the nuclear industry. They stole all the money too, see? That's why they're going to pull the tax incentive, because Doge noticed they had stole all that incentives were being stolen by the industry. Sorry, I meant to turn the volume down when I'm slurping. I wish it were that simple. So what's the answer? Is nuclear power good or bad? It's bad. Holy shit. It's the worst thing I ever created, period. He said, I wish it was that simple. No, you don't, you piece of shit. To the extent small reactors might give us another tool to complement solar and wind alongside of stuff like advanced geothermal. Advanced geothermal? You don't need advanced geothermal. What the fuck are you talking about? Advanced geothermal, good, although we probably shouldn't spend too much more taxpayer money on it yet. Now, I'm not sure if they're talking about small modular reactors or geothermal. Like geothermal, anybody can build it. You can build your own geothermal. Just got to rent out the equipment or get a truck to come in and drill down and put your hoses down there, get a couple of pumps. You can look up what you need to do. Anybody can do it. Any community can do it. Like I can drill enough geothermal holes in my garden, right? And that can power the whole little tiny community where I'm to. Good, although we probably shouldn't spend too much more taxpayer money on it yet. I'm not sure if they're referring to advanced geothermal or small modular reactor. I'm going to assume it's advanced geothermal because it's a pro-nuclear story. Sammy, Roth on X, is just an unlikable person, isn't he? He's a lawyer, too. I don't know if it's a he or she, but they're a piece of shit, whichever it is. Editor's note, nuclear PR glow up. Glow up. Elizabeth Moron, or Meager, I'm sorry, Moron. Oh, look, farmland right alongside nuclear plant. That's the scariest. Those tall stacks at each nuclear plant, that's where they're pumping the radiation so it falls on the farm. But eventually, whatever doesn't land right away covers the whole planet. That's why you don't want to eat food for them, because the heavy radioactive fallout is landing right there. They're insane, eh? And I covered that at the beginning of last night's show, if you're not familiar with that. I showed you all the evidence at the beginning of last night's show for the farms. It's horrifying, eh? That's a horrifying thing. If you spent any time listening to policymakers lately, you know nuclear is having a major moment. Unless you come here and you get the reality. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has promised a nuclear renaissance. Like, what are you talking about? It's absurd. Like, you don't have an application into the regulatory agencies, and then the only company there that's allegedly capable of producing the alleged small modular reactor, which is Rolls-Royce, is an actual massive reactor. It's a 500 megawatt reactor. It's a massive reactor. It's got nothing like the Canadian small modular reactor, boiling water 300X. The boiling water reactor X, 300, is a 240-foot skyscraper. It's 50 feet taller than Fukushima's massive reactors. And they're calling that a small modular reactor. I mean, because nobody's going to challenge them, right? And then anybody that might challenge them, which is only me basically, is ostracized completely. YouTube has a whole bunch of the pro-nuclear, and that's their job every day, is come shit on me and censor the shit out of me. Because they're cowards. They won't call into the show. They're too much of a coward to call into the show, right? They're just, they hide away like real life cowards, those guys. Small modular reactors have also piqued the interest of a private sector, with tech behemoths Amazon and Google and Microsoft all recently announcing investments, right? And so they don't have anybody in the industry to put on a pedestal, and so they take these big companies, and these companies are glad to play along with any corporation out there. Nuclear is no different than the rest of them they play along with. So if Amazon and Google and Microsoft, which are not really good companies at all, therefore that's somehow good, is it? Like, that's such a pathetic comparison to use that. That's such a desperation thing to do. Only 2 small modular reactors are operational today. China is not a small modular reactor. Go look it up yourself. It's massive. And the Russian so-called small modular reactor is a 15-story barge. A barge. The academic. Actually, I'll bring up a picture. Who knows how deep it is underwater? It was a haywire. It was an abandoned barge they patched up, and that they already took the fuel out of the reactor. And he said he got it in a storage room. Well, there's no such thing as a storage room. It's a fuel pool. So which means that the community, they're tied up at the local wharf, not in this picture that I'm going to pop up here in a second, but where they're actually to, that little community in the middle of nowhere, is just going to be absurd now that this is a 15-story building. This is not a small modular reactor. See that ship behind us? A massive ship. This is a huge, huge machine they're looking at right there. Who knows how deep it is? But they got the fuel out of it after 2 years, and it's stored in a storage room, they said. And we covered those stories originally, right? All the media come out and reported. They don't have storage rooms. It has to go underwater, which means you're boiling off about 120,000 liters into the community, and each liter is going to be just absurd amount of more curries than this stupid idiot, the bitch from Union of Unconcerned Scientists alleges came out of 3 Mile Island. What a piece of shit she turned out to be. It's very offensive for me to see these serial killers being put on a pedestal. Nuclear waste could power Europe for decades to start up plans to prove it. How many times have we heard this story? Thorizon. They're going to use thorium and nuclear waste. Spent nuclear fuel to power the grid with thorium. So thorium is just like, how would you put it? Thorium in this concept, this is a concept, is the equivalent of you putting 2 grains of sugar in your cup of coffee, as thorium is to the used nuclear fuel. Right? So the idea of putting thorium in there, because they can say that they can come out and claim that we're using new technology. Well, you're not. The thorium, you don't need the thorium. The spent fuel, you produce plutonium mixed oxide fuel from it. High assay, high grade fuel. Why would you need thorium? How's thorium supposed to work in that configuration? It doesn't. Thorium is such a low emitter, and the stuff they're going to mix it with is absurdly high emitter. 100% scam, right? But they're using thorium to penetrate, to try to penetrate people's minds. It's just a new propaganda. Europe has been turning uranium into energy for over half a century. And in the process, the continent amassed a vast stockpile of nuclear waste. The waste is splitting atoms. There's no way to contain it. So it's perpetually splitting atoms into your environment every second of every day. And the more you make, the worse it is for every species on the planet. For millions of years, billions of years. They acknowledge that. This radioactive material can take millions of years to become safe. Even when it decays down to radioactive lead, it's still anthropogenic man-made radioactive lead. It is not safe to bacteria, it's not safe to fungus, it's not safe to replicating cells. So it's not safe. And in that process over millions of years, it's splitting atoms. That's what fuel does, it splits atoms. Once you take it to the reactor, and so like the nuclear power is about the fuel cycle. The fuel cycle is about, you put this through a chain reaction, when it comes out 14 months later, it's a breeder fuel for making plutonium for the industry, for bombs. Up until then, it can't make the plutonium. It has to go through the fuel cycle. And if you look into the nuclear industry at all, you start looking at the fuel cycle, you'll find all the information that I'm not going to bother telling you right now you could ever hope to find. You'll see the enormity of what I'm talking about right away, even if you're not versed in this topic. And no one really knows what to do with it. Now, once you take the plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which is the result of reprocessing the spent fuel, the spent fuel itself, the emissions from that are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison by the atom. And with 2 million atoms on the head of a needle, I can't see it. It's very toxic and in amounts most people can't even perceive, even with a microscope. It's incredibly toxic to everything with replicating cells. And a single atom, the cesium, will pulse energy 600 feet every second, which will wreck your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells, your children's chromosomes, DNA and cells, insects, birds, mammals, animals, and everything else. It's an insidious weapon against everything with replicating cells. That's what radioactive fallout is. And that's what a fuel pool is. It's a radioactive fallout machine. It's the most vital, the most important thing that everybody needs to understand and appreciate and learn about and fear. You need to fear this because you're in proximity 100 miles of these disease factories. These are disease factories. That's what radioactive fallout is. I apologize. I'm still not myself here today. I've done pretty good today. I slept twice today. I'm so tired of sleeping. I'm just so tired. I hate it. I was never like this. Let me see what I'm doing here. How are we doing? We're getting there. I have to kick some ass though to get right through the rest of this. James Lewis has stepped up and donated $330 last night. My goodness. Bless your heart, James. Incredible timing too. Thorizon, a Franco-Dutch startup, had an idea: reuse the nuclear waste to generate new energy. That's somehow a new idea, is it? France has been doing it for 60 years at the La Hague plant, where they have 500 security guards. I lost my spot. I don't know where I'm to. Thorium. I think it's this story here, is it? No. Oh, I'm lost now. Oh, it's got to be down here somewhere. Below here and down here. Yeah, there you go. We're down here. And no one really knows what to do with it. That's perfect. That's what we're looking for. Has an idea to reuse nuclear waste to generate. Like, that's the oldest idea we got out there, for goodness sakes. And it is not to generate electricity as it is for a nuclear fuel cycle. Because when you put plutonium mixed oxide fuel through the burner, you're not burning it. It's not like a coal plant where you got train cars every day of coal. This stuff doesn't change. If it weighed 6 million pounds yesterday, it'll weigh 6 million pounds in 1,000 years. It's splitting atoms. It's a perpetual machine. And the atoms, unfortunately, attack everything with replicating cells in every species. There's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. I mean, if the people in Israel knew what the Dimona nuclear plant was really doing to their health, they would demand nuclear be stopped immediately. They would never attack a nuclear site if the population actually understood the significance of doing it. The company is developing a small modular molten salt reactor. Oh, you mean like Santa Susana, which melted down in 1959 and was equal to 460 3-mile islands melting down at the one time in radioactive fallout. Or the Enrico Fermi, which was a molten salt reactor. Or the Mandu reactor that melted in Japan, or the one that melted at Idaho National Laboratory, or at Hanford. You mean those molten salt reactors. Those breeder reactors. Run on a mix of spent fuel and thorium. What are you going to put thorium in there when you got mint plutonium mixed oxide fuel? What's the purpose of thorium? How is thorium going to enhance plutonium mixed oxide fuel? It's not like tritium on a bomb. It doesn't have any of these attributes. And you won't even see the single of thorium within 1,000 yards of plutonium mixed oxide fuel. What's the point of it? It's just a psychological thing, see? They call the company Thorizon or something, right, to lull you into complacency of using plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which is spent fuel reclaimed. It's not spent nuclear fuel, it's processed spent nuclear fuel. It's plutonium mixed oxide fuel. It's called MOX. It should be plutonium MOX is what they really call it. Right? Like in the lectures and presentations, that's what they'll refer to it as plutonium MOX fuel. Europe is sitting on a stockpile of valuable nuclear material. We've heard this song and dance over and over and over. With the right technology, the waste becomes a resource. It's better to burn you. They should burn people like you. Because there's lots of you out there. That's enough to power a planet for at least 12 years. We'll dehydrate you like a mummy and we'll just burn you in a big incinerator. Thorizon. Man, and I gained a 3D rendition, right? 3D rendition. When are you guys going to get creative and make like a 4D rendition? Same song and dance, different company. So they got a lot of money though. Not that they're going to produce anything. When the radioactive uranium is used as a fuel in nuclear reactors, atoms undergo fission, releasing heat. Like they're talking to a 6-year-old child, right? They're not trying to talk to an adult. The heat is then used to produce steam, which spins a turbine to generate electricity. Once you take it out, it's still producing the heat. It's produced it by fission, by splitting atoms. These are perpetual machines. They split atoms forever. This is why you can't store it. This is why there's... What are you going to do with the nuclear waste? Well, nuclear waste is something that's splitting atoms into your community every day. You can't contain it. It shouldn't exist. It has no right to exist. Still retains 90% of its uranium original energy. It's not like a piece of wood that was slightly burnt. It's a anthropogenic man-made element that is splitting atoms. And so if you can see it, just hang on. Every fuel pool does this one thing each day. And I have a simple way of explaining that. Just entertain me for a second until I can find my spot. Every fuel pool, there's 1,000 fuel pools on the planet. And each day, all day, if you could see what's coming out of the tall, skinny stacks, this is what it would look like for each pool. There's 1,000 pools doing exactly what I'm going to show you. If you had 1,000 pools, they all start tomorrow. Right? They all started venting tomorrow. This is what the whole planet from each one would look like. Each one could do this. Each fuel pool on the planet is doing this, and this is what each fuel pool on the planet looks like after 16 days. So imagine there's 1,000 fuel pools doing this exact same thing every 16 days. Now you're being realistic. Now you're starting to be honest. Now we can have a conversation. But you can't see it, and you can't smell it, and you can't hear it, and you can't feel it. And it's splitting atoms. All of these atoms you're looking at is like an invisible snowstorm covers the whole planet. The snow never melts. The snow never goes away. It never stops snowing. And this goes forever. Now you're being honest. Now you're starting to be a little bit honest. And that's why the International Atomic Energy Agency is so insidiously evil. It's because they're aware of everything I showed you. Yeah, this model is based on 31 days. So every fuel pool, if it started today, 1,000 of them would look exactly like that. Each one, not just 1,000 total, but each fuel pool would do this over 31 days. And this radioactive fallout gets assimilated in every branch, every insect, every bird, every tree, every phytoplankton, every organism, freshwater, saltwater. It's everywhere. It gets assimilated in everything. And every one of these atoms are pulsing energy at the speed of light. So if it gets in your body, it's still pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. Your body's going to attack it for the rest of your life with white blood cells, no matter what species you are. And then it's pulsing in your body's wrecking your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells. Your body has to try to repair that every second. The insects, the birds, mammals, animals, everything, whales, puppies. It can't repair that damage every second. And at the same time, it has to attack with white blood cells the source and try to build a tumor around it. That's the ultimate. The body doesn't know what it is. It's anthropogenic, man-made. It's not from the solar system. Your body doesn't recognize it. It treats it as a foreign object. So does every species. It's a disaster of absurd proportions. And you shouldn't tolerate it for a second. And every species is depending on you to say something or do something to try to help change this equation. This can only end with an extinction event. You don't need nuclear meltdowns or anything else, but we've had our share of them, right? It's not a game. This is not a game, okay? This is life or death. Every one of these shows is here because it's life and death. We're here because we have to be here. I'm happy to be here, trust me. Because nobody else is doing it. And it's a crazy amount of work. But I go through all the extra work. I dot all the I's and crosses all the T's to make it palatable for anybody, right? To anybody that comes through, to get an overload of education so that they can rationalize themselves, so that they can extrapolate on their own. So they don't need to keep coming back here. They have so much information they can extrapolate accurately once they get this basics of the functions of it, once it's in your body, all the other functions of the... Because like for every white blood cell your body, or birds or mammals or animals or anybody else produces, they're going to displace a red blood cell that carries oxygen and nutrition. So there's a incredible cause and effect immediately, permanently. But it might not manifest as a tumor or something, or a heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. It might not show up for many years, but it's coming. And many different versions. You might die of a heart attack before the cancer is manifested and diagnosed. And you're feeding your loved ones to food from the nuclear wasteland, like around nuclear power plants or Japan, and they get Alzheimer's and dementia. We're seeing children, like 1 and 2-year-olds now with Alzheimer's and dementia. Children, not autism or Down syndrome, which all of these epidemics now are traceable to the inception of the nuclear industry. The cancer clusters epidemic began in the 70s during peak nuclear weapons. I don't go through all the work because it's fun, okay? Even though I make it fun sometimes, because otherwise the reason I'm going bald is because I pulled most of my hair out with my 2 hands because of this industry. When I was on the research expeditions, you have no idea. You have no idea of what every night was like for me. To see no species. And then, to see the world not react appropriately is just... I blame myself, but clearly I shouldn't blame myself. In the United States, scientists believe it could power the country for around 100 years. It's illegal to make plutonium mixed oxide fuel in the United States and Canada. They are changing the laws because they need that for the small modular reactors. They don't need thorium. They need plutonium mixed oxide fuel. And so by framing it this way, they're hoping to sneak in under the radar of people like me, and they're clearly wrong. Why aren't we reusing nuclear waste? Because it's crimes against humanity. The emissions from separating the plutonium, first off, is absurd emissions. It's catastrophic. In fact, Donneray and Sellafield, United Kingdom, Windscale, and La Hague in France I got many studies that are clearly shown that those 3 reprocessing facilities for the plutonium mixed oxide fuel we're talking about contaminated the Arctic and Europe from the separation, right? Because you're boiling the fuel in 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures of nitrous acid. And so you're aerosoling the fuel. And then you're extrapolating the plutonium, but the other stuff you got nowhere to put it, and it escapes. And it's not an accident. They used to pump it. They used to have like big pipes deep underground. They used to pump it down there. But then the water tables became so radioactive they couldn't use it. Well, France and Japan still processes some of their used fuel. Most of the world's nuclear waste today ends up in massive steel cylinders most of it's in spent fuel pools, splitting atoms directly into an environment with no containment. They're not in dry cast. Only a small fraction is actually in dry cast worldwide, you piece of shit. You piece of shit that wrote that, you scumbag. You scumbag that wrote that. Whoever wrote the story clearly is the International Atomic Energy Agency, and the journalists who put their name on it didn't write the story. These are very difficult stories to write. To be this sadistic, you really got to be with the International Atomic Energy Agency. They're very anal about every single story, by the way. They're just unlikable pieces of shit, aren't they? Efforts to bury deep underground for eternity, like Finland's 1,500 foot deep Okano repository, are making progress but remain contentious. Contentious! They're tunneled under the ocean, so when it finally melts down, and it will, the ocean's going to pour in. It's the stupidest, and we see the United Kingdom has the same plan, because you know it's going to melt down. And the United Kingdom dumped it in the ocean for 30 friggin' years straight. It's special built freighters where they just go out and dump barrels of it over the side of the freighters. You had to dump it, and it was all on the continental shelf. And anything that didn't sink right away was shot. But anything that sank, every 33 feet, there's 14.6 pounds per square inch atmospheric pressure, right? And so after about 100 feet, you got 3 atmospheric pressures, so those drums will just crumble. And because the bottom and the top are crimped on, not only that, I was a commercial diver for 14 years, and I've seen my share of 45-gallon drums, and there wasn't one of them wasn't rusted right through, not one. Efforts to bury deep underground for eternity. It doesn't work that way. It melts down. You have to deal with it. It's splitting atoms. It's generating heat the whole time. When you put it in a containment, you still have to cool it down, and you can't open the container up because it'll explode. Once oxygen goes in there, it'll detonate. Meanwhile, expanding nuclear power in Europe continues to be a thorny issue, and the tide may be turning, faced with twin crises of climate change, which is caused by 80 years of emission from the nuclear industry. The emissions are pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. It's like an invisible snowstorm from 1,000 points on the planet every day. And every atom is pulsing energy at the speed of light. And radioactive plumes are the only pollution that covers the entire planet. The gas, oil, and coal emissions don't travel very far at all. They certainly don't travel up into the tropospheres, and they don't travel more than 50 or 100 miles from the site. These are huge particles we're talking about. So I'm being generous when I say it travels 50 or 100 miles from the site. And the emissions from coal, gas, and oil is carbon. You can't have trees or plants or puppies or anything else without carbon. Thorizon, which is not necessary for the small modular reactor, so why would it be necessary for theirs? Operates at high temperatures but low pressure, making it safer and more efficient. We've heard these scams every time. There's 100 companies out there, small modular reactor companies. They're the only one, or no, I think there's another one talking about thorium too. But thorium is the equivalent of throwing 2 grains of sugar into your coffee when it comes to nuclear reactors. Thorium is not going to change the equation in a chain reaction. When you're talking about using plutonium mixed oxide, high assay fuel, why would thorium be a catalyst for anything? It's not. If it was, to be using it a long time ago before this company showed up, I can tell you that much. If something goes wrong, the salt solidifies and contains the radioactive material. It's never done that before. Never done it at Santa Susana. Never done it at Enrico Fermi. Never done it at the Manju reactor. Never done it anywhere. In fact, you won't be able to decommission it. It'll eventually penetrate containment. And once oxygen goes in there, by the way, or water, it'll detonate. So if you introduce water into the meltdown of these types of reactors, it'll detonate. If you introduce oxygen in these types of reactors, the salt reactor, it's going to detonate. So if you have an event and you spray water in there, you send in the fire department, they're going to spray water, it's going to blow up immediately. I mean, blow up too. This is a company that's just looking for a bunch of investors that are stupid. And they'll get them. They'll get them. Molten salt reactors were first developed in the 60s, Oak Ridge National Laboratory in the US, and showed great promise. No, it didn't. They never reached commercial viability, largely because housing the corrosive salt safely proved technically challenging and expensive. It wasn't technically challenging, it was impossible. And once something goes wrong, if oxygen or water goes in, it'll detonate, and you can never get back on the site. And you just destroyed the future of humanity. Funding a nuclear waste renaissance. So far, they raised 42 million sterlings or euro. So a lot of money for an empty promise. Again, there's 100 of them out there doing the exact same thing, right? And there's just 90% of the money will get stole. That's what they do. That's all they're good at. They're not good at anything else. They said he needed at least almost $1 billion US to begin building a prototype reactor. They'll never get, even if they get it, they can't build it. They don't have an application into the regulatory agency for the design. So they're at least a decade away from even having the design approved. Typically make them a hard sell. No, they're an impossible sell because it's technology that's already been used and melted down over and over and over. You really think this company is going to be different? And they have the vulture capital money? It's just a write-off for them, see? In the United States, relatively small teams have been able to scale much faster, obtain more private funding. So it doesn't mean nothing. Terra Power, which is Bill Gates, and X Power, highly connected to the industry, got $1 billion each. They still haven't produced anything. Then they're not going to. It's a Ponzi scheme for the stock markets. It's not going to commercialize this technology. Like, you can't do jack shit with $1 billion in the nuclear industry. You can't do jack shit. You build jack shit with $1 billion. Nothing. You're just another bunch of lawyers. If Thorizon manages to overcome the hurdles They could hit 3 birds with 1 stone, cleaning up nuclear. It's the same song and dance we hear over and over and over from these companies. None of it's simply true. The International Degenerate Agency should take charge of Pakistan's nuclear weapon. I was going to put that in the poll tonight. And I said, well, with all the chaos Israel's creating, it'd be interesting to ask that question. All right, that's a good poll, man. With Trump threatening to nuke Iran, should Iran flatten Israel? If I was Iran, that's what I would do. If they're gonna nuke me, my country, then I'm just gonna flatten Israel, and then nobody got a problem anymore, right? And everybody go back to being buddies again and get on with the world. If Israel wasn't in the equation, that country wouldn't be in the chaos it is. Right? There wouldn't be no Holocaust going on in Gaza, and that's a Holocaust what they're doing there. What they've been doing there for their whole legacy. Israel is about 7 million people. 5 million of them, their job is to support the ultra-Orthodox Jews. They don't work, they read 2 books, the Torah and the Talmud. Right? And so that whole ideology you see going on there is about the Orthodox Jews. It's about funding them, it's about housing them, clothing them, feeding them. It's about giving them everything. They don't work. They just hate. That's their whole ideology is hate. There's no such thing as a peaceful Orthodox Jew, right? There's just simply, it doesn't exist. They friggin' hate everything on the planet. Except for Israelis and Jews. And I don't really like a lot of Israelis or Jews either. Unless you're Orthodox, they don't even like you. The International Degenerate Agency, UN's little pet moron, should take charge of Pakistan's nuclear weapon. Why? Oh, why would United Nations, a military-industrial complex, IAEA is not anybody's friend, not even the IAEA's friend. Iran has no sacred nuclear site, the Atomic Energy Agency, Raphael Grossi says. I gotta nuke them anyway, Dana. Israel said so. Israel don't give a fuck about anybody. It just screws up everything. He's always sticking his nose in everybody's business on the planet because it's a welfare state that shouldn't exist. Small mountain town. They've been kicked out of everywhere they went for 2,000 years is what they like to say. Gee, I wonder why. Nobody else has been kicked out of everywhere they went for 2,000 years, except for Israel. Because they're impossible to get along with. Small mountain town to become America's nuclear hotspot as uranium mine opens. Now, the original headline on this story was something like, that much uranium could power 85 nuclear submarines and produce 1,000 nuclear bombs. That was basically what the headline was. And so when I clicked on it, it had a different headline. It had this headline. So they found another large stockpile of uranium, and the first ideology is they can get 85 new nuclear submarines and 1,000 nuclear weapons. What does that tell us about this industry? It's not an industry you want for a friend. I can tell you that much. They're nobody's friend. Scores of community members turn out for nuclear project information. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization here in Canada had $26 billion for 20-something years. Never grew a cent of interest. And that money was money from the ratepayers. But yet they haven't got a cent of interest even today. What does that tell us? What do you think is going on there? How much interest can you grow on $26 million a year? That's the mayor of some little shithole town. And she sold out the whole town so she can get a big kickback from the... Because $26 million is making interest. And they're taking that money and buying degenerate idiot machines like this off. That's what's really going on. That's the mayor of this little nothing town. full of wonderful people, except for people like this. It's just a tiny little town. And the Nuclear Waste Management Organization has been there for 14 years throwing money around. New fire trucks and throwing money to the town councils every year. Here's $1 million, have a nice day. I don't care how you spend it. We got interest rolling in, baby, on $26 billion. Here's $1 million, fuck off. We want people to be able to come and learn and educate and ask more questions. They don't want people like me there. They only want the pro-nuclear snot rags there, right? The ones that are telling them it's like a banana for the last 14 years. Well, we want people there. Well, what happens if I show up there? They're going to let me set up a little booth there and a little projector and educate the population on what's really going to happen? Everything is vented all the way on the highway there, so all the farms are going to be radioactive food. And when they get there, they're going to repackage everything, which means, guarantee you, everything is vented because you can't introduce oxygen in it. If you contain the radioactive fuel rods, what we're talking about, and then you open it up, it's going to detonate. So that means those communities are going to be just absurd sickness. It's going to be absurd diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. Former chair of the Willingness Committee, everybody has to willingly want the deep geological repository, the big hole in the ground for the nuclear dump. Willingness Committee. And that blew my mind when I seen those connotations, willingness. They had companies and, oh man, they were doing polls on the willingness. Are you willing to let us do this here? And they never told the truth a single time about what they were actually doing. They really are just the worst humans I've ever come across, the Canadian Nuclear Waste Management Organization. He said, I hope over this time, this will be good for English. How can it be good over time when you're going to contaminate every human there with incredible carcinogenic radioactive fallout all day, every day? Their water supply will be brutal forever, for 1 billion years. Zaporizhzhia, a nuclear disease factory, has relied on a single power line for over 1 week. Well, none of the reactors are running. It's the fuel pools. You got to keep the water circulating in the fuel pools or it'll melt down. The generators can take care of that. They don't generally run on the generators, but I'm sure they have resolved that by now. But they're dependent on external power, all of these sites. So they have one external line coming in. And again, Raphael Grossi, just a despicable, unlikable subhuman species that has just destroyed probably 1 billion lives since he's been in the Director General. The Director General. Watch this. When he walks away, he leaves his shadow. So he died that day. Woo! James got another song up. Birdie Pop. That's hilarious. And James Lewis is produced. Now, I've made a couple of videos where I took a lot of his songs, and I don't know what to do. See, I don't want to take all of his best music and put it in a video per se, right? Because that's taking his thunder. I got to be careful of that stuff. You can't go doing that to people, right? Because you want people to go to his site and learn, because all of his videos are important, right? So I might try to make a video of 10 songs or something instead of 40. I don't want to take a chance, right? And I want people to go to his site because he has over 300 anti-nuclear songs. It's absurd, man. That many songs? I could never be convinced a year ago that somebody could produce 300 anti-nuclear songs and videos and I just couldn't be convinced that could happen. And even seeing it with my own eyes, we play his music at the beginning and the end of every show. I still can't comprehend how that's even possible. Because, it's so much work just to do the things I'm doing. I can't imagine doing what he's doing. Because he's got to make all the film and everything else, the music. He's got to put everything together. With Trump threatening to nuke Iran, should Iran flatten Israel? Just imagine if Iran just goes, says fuck it, and attacks Israel with thousands of drones every week. What are they going to do? They can't stop that. And even if they nuke Iran, they still can't stop it because Iran's got thousands of miles of tunnels. And then Iran's got Russia in one back pocket and China in the other back pocket. Israel's going to disappear. Trump's saying he's going to nuke them, turn them to dust and everything else, is not even real life posturing. It doesn't make any sense to say that. He's not going to intimidate the Iranians by saying stuff like that. Okay. Well, we made it through the night. I don't know how I make it through the night. We made it, though. I'm really happy that we made it. A bit of a struggle for a bit there for me, but I just got to set myself up here now. So what I'll do is I'll close the poll after. Alrighty, have a great night, everybody. Have a great weekend. I probably won't be back until Sunday. We do our shows Sunday to Thursday, right? And unless something happens. And I'm waiting, hoping the weather is going to change. It was supposed to be nice today. It wasn't. I wasn't good enough to do anything, but I got to get out and start doing stuff. Spring is here almost, I guess. Actually, spring is here. Tonight's the first night since last summer where I didn't have heat on. So maybe, who knows? Alrighty, hugs for everybody. Have a great night. We'll see everybody on the next show. I'm going to control the volume on my side. I'm going to make sure we got 1080 or high quality, and then I'll restart it and turn the volume up. And we'll see you on Sunday. Have a great night. And a great weekend. If you make it this far, consider giving me a thumbs up. It probably won't show up, but it might. But go over and give James a thumb up.
Saw the clip just yesterday. Birds drop fast then snap midway. Nobody knows the how or why. They just fall right from the sky. Doorbell cams and shaky phones. Birdies explode and fall to ground. They all guess but skip the why. Just say weird and walk on by. They peck the grass, they sip the rain. Something small gets in their wings, and no one checks for tiny things. Birdie pop, no one saw. Feathers flick, then that's it, gone. Replay, clip the loops again. Snap and scroll, just count to 10. Birdie pop, blink and miss. Pop, pop, pop. No alarm, just miss the sign. Pop, pop. They don't test what no one sees. They don't guess it's from the sea. No one moves, just press rewind. Mute the clip and say it's fine. Birdie pop, no one knows why. Pop, pop, pop. Feathers flick, then that's it, gone. Pop, pop, pop.
That's a story that just recently came out. Have a great night, everybody. See you on the next one.